Do you have a favorite monster movie, or is it kind of a stretch to say that Beast of Legend of Boggy Creek is kind of your
Well,
favorite?
yeah, I'm obligated to say the Legend of Boggy Creek, right? And it really is my favorite movie. For obvious reasons. I mean, I went and wrote a book on the subject, but um, just the effect it had on me as a kid, and just that I love monsters of the woods, kind of big hairy monsters. I love werewolves and stuff, and so it plays into that. I mean, technically, it's not the greatest horror film, and I think second to that would probably be The Shining,
Awesome.
favorite film. So I know those are two totally different worlds apart, but really, I just love so many horror films. It's really hard to pick.
Yeah, it's no wonder we can see all your paraphernalia in the background. It's pretty obvious you're a mega monster nerd like many of
Yeah.
us here. I got into this whole Bigfoot thing because of monsters. I was in love with. Yeah, I mean, for me, like my favorites are like Jaws and some of the older horror movies. I love The Evil Dead. I'm a little scared about this remake, but you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always treading, thin ice to make these remakes, and I know everybody complains about them, but some of them turn out good, so it's worth a shot. And I mean, it's hard to replace movies. And if you've seen it as a child, it's like when you hear music when you were a kid. There's a certain connection you have to the time and place you heard or you saw it that can never be replaced. And people have, even though the movie, you may look at it now and go, oh, that's kind of cheesy, but even The Legend of Boggy Creek, it was just the timing when I was in a drive-in theater, and the fact that I had camped in Arkansas and had been a hunter and I'd been in these small towns. All those factors went in to make it my favorite movie. But if you showed it to some kid now, they may say, that's hokey or silly, It's just something about the nostalgia.
Yeah, it is. It is a little bit hokey today by standards, but there's something genuinely creepy about it still. Love it. Is that the primary reason you decided to write The Beast of Boggy Creek, or was that just you decided to write a book first and then you picked Boggy Creek? What came first?
Well, it was kind of like everything aligned just right. I've always wanted to write a book, and I've dealt with some other things like comic book scripts and comic book that I did in association with my band Ghoul Town, and written some short stories that got published. But so I kind of had it in my mind I wanted to write a book, and really I started getting heavily into Bigfoot research and cryptids and cryptozoology. I mean, I'd always liked it as a kid, but for some reason I just really wanted to get an excuse to go back in the woods. I had been a hunter most of my young life with my dad, but when I went off to do music, I just didn't have time. Every weekend I'm out either on tour or in a club, and so Bigfoot kind of gave me a way to just reconnect with nature, so to speak. And then at the same time, I started writing for the horror magazine Rue Morgue, and they brought me on as a cryptozoologist advisor because so many horror movies deal with Bigfoot and creatures like that. So they wanted my expertise from knowing the real research end of it in the legends and lore, as well as the movie end. So doing that, I thought, man, I always loved The Legend of Boggy Creek. The tagline for the movie was a true story. And I thought, man, I want to look into this more. Maybe I can write an article on it. And once I did, I started researching and realized, man, this is not an article. This would make a great book. I couldn't believe that nobody had written a book on this. I mean, all the Bigfoot books out there and all the horror movie books, nothing had been written. And I thought, man, this is it. And it just sort of aligned and just it just sort of shot out of a cannon once I was done with the book. And that's the way this whole year has been.
Now, when you were down there doing research, you were going into the woods too. So you weren't just interviewing the people from the story, but you were going into the woods and checking out the area known for the legend. What's it like today down there?
Well, I mean, it's still a very small town. I mean, back in the 70s, when this all sort of came to the attention of the public and they made the movies, the little town of Fouke in southwest Arkansas had a population of about 500 people. It's only about 800 today, so it hasn't really expanded or anything. They've put a few highways in there, so they've clear cut some of the woods and swamps, and but basically it's very remote. It's still remote. There's a lot of places where you just don't want to develop. So those backwoods are still there on the Sulphur River bottoms. And when you just get a little bit off the road, the woods are thick. You immediately are away from civilization and into a completely different environment. So even today, I think it's possible that a small population of some sort of strange creatures really could live down there and nobody would ever see them.
It's interesting with Fouke. The prints had 3 toes. Is that correct?
Right.
How did that pan out?
Right. Southern Sasquatch in general is always associated with having 3 toes because a lot of that comes from the Fouke Monster thing, because back in the 70s they found a trackway which had some really good prints that went for about 150 yards, and those prints had 3 toes. And in some of the other sightings at the time, the police found some strange tracks and noted that they kind of looked like they had 3 toes. So that just became the association with the creature that apparently it had 3 toes. But in actuality, I mean, some people in that area have found 5-toed tracks. There's even been a report of a 4-toe track. So the whole track thing is definitely confusing, and not to say somebody didn't do something dubious to create maybe one of those tracks, which kind of misled people. So
did you come across shenanigans when you were down there, or you?
There's a few reports where at that time it was a lot of craziness going on, and some kids reported getting in a fight with a creature, which the sheriff at the time quickly just threw that out the window and ended up fining the guys for making a wrongful report. And you always have these people who say, my cousin, he's the Fouke Monster, or, my uncle's Bigfoot because he did, he dressed up in a suit. But when you start looking at the history of this stuff, I found sightings that go back almost a century. Even if one family was trying to do this, they'd have to be all over the place, constantly doing it, and you would be in jeopardy of your life because a lot of the sightings were made by hunters in the area. And, you're running across the road in Arkansas, not a smart thing. So, while there's probably been some shenanigans, hoaxes associated with it, it's few and far between.
Well, that's promising. That makes it a really compelling story, to say the least. What about other monsters? You're known kind of as a cryptozoologist, not just a Bigfoot guy. You're not known as just a Fouke guy. I think you've written some stuff even, or have done radio interviews, and you've talked about things like Mothman, and you're known as the Count. Am I correct? So I'm guessing that there's a fascination, judging by a few things in the background, and an interest in vampires, other types of monsters. What else have you investigated?
Well, yeah, I've just had a lifelong love of all monsters, especially the classics, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Dracula, the Mummy, the creature from the Black Lagoon is probably one of my favorite movie monsters, So, I'm knowledgeable on all horror movie things. What you're seeing in the background is just a small part of my collection. My office here is just covered. In fact, HGTV has a show called Home Strange Home, and they came in here and filmed my house. Nice. It should air sometime soon, but anyway. But as far as what I've sort of done as far as research and what I'm writing on in the subjects, I do concentrate on cryptids, which would be quote unquote real life monsters, hidden animals, unknown animals, and that would of course be Bigfoot, which I've done probably the most research on. Given where I live as well, I'm in Texas, so I can't just run out and research the Loch Ness Monster or Ogo or Lake Champlain in my backyard. Of course, we do have reports of these dogs that they call chupacabras, So, I've studied a lot about chupacabras, written a little bit about the legends and lore and sightings of those creatures. Other what I call swamp monsters, which I kind of have an affinity for. I've done a lot of traveling in the Southeast from Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Georgia, South Carolina, and gone to a lot of swamps. So you have reports of like lizard men, scaly humanoids, things like that. And I'm doing some writing on those right now.
What monster, or cryptid, I should say, what cryptid do you give the best chance outside of Sasquatch? Do you give the best chance of actually being discovered, if possible, in North America? Do you have one, like a strong second?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I think some of the, like Lake Champlain, what they call Champ, it's right. A lake monster. That there's some pretty convincing pieces of film and photograph and sighting reports out of there. So I think that some of the lake monsters are a possibility. It's hard when you talk about chupacabra because there's two aspects to that, because you've got what originally happened in the Puerto Rican reports is a different creature than described in the Texas reports. Now, there is physical animals that the media calls chupacabra, which we also call blue dogs here.
I believe your buddy Ken Gerhardt, is that his name? Was doing a series on that online that I just watched, and there's a good amount of evidence to suggest those guys are out there killing chickens and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it may not be a monster per se, but it could be some kind of a hybrid canid of some sort. So it would classify itself as possibly an unknown animal. And yeah, Ken's definitely done a lot of research on that, and has been at the forefront of some of that on some of the shows. But as far as what I believe could be real, I'd say some of the lake monsters around the U.S. At the top of my list is something called the orang pendek, which is a smaller Bigfoot in Sumatra. So, but
I spoke to Adam Davies about orang a couple times.
Yeah, there's a lot of credible reports, with some wildlife researchers and conservationists and photographers that you just can't, it's just incomparable with those kind of reports. So, yeah, that's a cool one. I'd love to go over there.
You seem to me like you should have a screenplay. Are you working on anything? You seem like the kind of guy who should have a screenplay in the works right now. Is that a good assumption to make?
Well, I try not to veer off into too many directions. While I have this idea that I could do a great screenplay, I just sort of try to keep on one path. With the success of the Beast of Boggy Creek book, I thought, okay, let's just try to follow that up with another book and just sort of kind of keep in one direction for a while rather than veer off. But yeah, definitely there's that bug that bites me every once in a while that I should write a screenplay.
I think you need to do a documentary on the Beast of Boggy Creek. I mean, the Legend of Boggy Creek was kind of a documentary, but you've gone deep. You've got the background and you've got the written work behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually looked into that and talked to several people. I deal a lot. I've got a lot of appearances coming up on reality shows and TV, and so I've gotten to know a lot of people who are knowledgeable about doing documentaries and the costs of these sort of thing. And I've kind of been looking at basically trying to do a documentary on Boggy Creek, but it's it is an undertaking, and I'd have to stop everything I'm doing, try to get some kind of funding, to do it right, because I wouldn't just people just take a camera. It's like if I do anything, I want to do it right. So it seems like a long road to make a documentary.
I just thought I'd ask. I just kind of feel like you put in the legwork, and if anybody could do it, it'd be you. So, are you a fan of any of the zombie stuff going on? I mean, there's a lot of zombie in the news today. Everyone's excited. Season finale of Walking Dead's coming up. You get into anything?
Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those that was a longtime reader of the Walking Dead comic book. I mean, I've read every issue, and it's somewhere in the hundreds now. So when I saw that they were going to make a TV series. I thought, man, this is killer, because that's just one of my favorite, most compelling zombie epics, that I've been reading. And so I'm into the zombie thing. I mean, I've been I've been a horror fan for so long that I've been into this forever. And now it seems zombies are such a craze, and have been for the last few years, that, it's not like I'm freaked out or all ate up with zombies, because I've loved zombies since I was a kid. But I'm definitely a fan of the good stuff, movies like Zombieland, that I do it well, the TV series. So yeah, I'm a fan.
Yeah, I'm a fan of monster movies, period. I can't get enough of werewolf movies, but man, they've gayed up the werewolf genre a bit lately, so it's
yeah. This whole gaying up of werewolves is
what's up with that shit, man?
I don't know. There's something about that new generation of kids that needs that, like, emo thing, like this real sentimental aspect. I'm like, dude, just get a werewolf with big teeth and blood dripping and tearing up.
Right.
I mean, that's
it's almost politically incorrect to make your monster satanic anymore, and it's like, what's up with that?
I think that just all that does is build for a resurgence of satanic werewolf movies, because you know what I'm saying? People just finally get fed up with that. You've oversaturated the Twilight thing, and now it's just like werewolves, just rip up the movie screen.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I need to see a good werewolf movie pretty soon. So I want to go back. Do you have a favorite, maybe not a favorite, but like, say, a top 2 or 3 monster movie scenes?
Again, there's like a flood of going through my mind. What would be my favorite? One of the iconic scenes in my mind that I remember as a kid that was really shocking would have to be the scene in Alien. And Alien's a sci-fi movie, but it's also a horror movie.
Yes, it was.
And when the alien pops out of the guy's stomach, he writhes around. He's on the table. I was pretty young when I saw that in the theater. My parents had some crazy idea to take me to see that. I think I had nightmares for weeks. But I mean, that is a horrific scene. And when that alien popped out of that guy's stomach, I was just freaked out. And that's always stood out as a scary moment. Halloween, I think the first scene, they kind of film that scene where he's looking at the house, Michael Myers, and they show him from the back, and you just see part of his leg, and he's just from the back. There's just something about that silhouette looking at the house where you knew the people in the house are not safe.
That's intense, man. Yeah, it's a very intense scene. Like, for me, like, people always say, well, those aren't really horror movies. When I say, well, the opening scene from Jaws, to me, that's a fucking horror movie.
That's another one, dude.
It's like, or when you hear the T-Rex come in on Jurassic Park and you see the little water shiver and like that intensity. I look for intensity in scenes, and that Halloween scene is fucking intense.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jaws. I saw that in the theater as well. My parents, again, had great timing because they took me to see Jaws right, like, literally a week before we were going a trip to Florida to go to Disney World and the beaches in Florida. And so we see Jaws, and that first scene scared the hell out of me when, the girl's swimming and she's going to get it.
Yeah.
And so literally a week later, I'm down on the beach, like, I'm looking at the water going, I'll just kind of play on the sand here with I was collecting rubber sharks because I had sharks on the brain. I had this big pile of rubber sharks, but I was pretty much staying on the beach.
That's funny, man. Yeah, I went with my older cousin to that. I was like 5 years old. We saw it in the theater, and I think that's why I ended up falling in love with, like, monster movies. And I mean, I was always a Godzilla fan or whatever. But 6 years old or 5 years old, sitting in the theater watching this giant shark tear people apart, I was like,
"Oh man,
that's intense."
Yeah.
Okay, so staying with monster movies, you brought up a movie that I always found creepy because I watched it again when I was like probably 5 years old, staying home from school. Was A Creature from the Black Lagoon. What makes that movie so effing creepy?
Well, I think it kind of builds on a lot of inherent fears in people. There's something about a creature that is sort of reptilian or aquatic that also walks on two legs. It walks upright like a man. It's a humanoid, and therefore, by that you assume it has some intelligence, but it's still reptilian. It's ancient. A fossil, a living fossil. It's just a green monster out of somebody's nightmare, and I think it really worked perfectly the way Universal did that film. And if you think about it, the previous films, Frankenstein and Dracula and the Wolfman and all those, built somewhat on the character of Boris Karloff or on Bela Lugosi, but the creature was a complete suit. And so they really had to make that suit great to come off like that. And I mean, if you think about it, it's hard pressed for monster movies these days to come up with a suit that convincing, but it looked good. It was they shot water scenes with one of the suits. Just an amazing accomplishment to make that a convincing monster. And I think when it got up on screen, it really scared people in the 50s for that reason.
Yeah. Speaking of convincing suits and making things look good for film, what's your position on Patterson-Gimlin? I ask this of everybody because I'm still to this day on the fence. What's your position?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think rationally you kind of got to be on the fence about it because ultimately it can't be proved one way or another, and you got to kind of keep an open mind about it. Everybody sees one detail that says this makes it certain that it's fake, or you see a detail and this makes it certain that it's real. Well, those details are in a lot of ways based on a very grainy film at best. The thing is I know Bob Gimlin and have actually interviewed him several times, and I've heard him talk about the story. And the one thing that sways me to think that it's definitely real is just his character. I mean, he just does not seem like a guy who's going to try to uphold some kind of a hoax for this long. I mean, he's just a country boy, a rancher, a guy who loves horses and nature, and this is not a big-time swindler kind of guy. So while I know there's some derogatory things said about Patterson, that doesn't make his film fake, based on that. So I guess my long way around this saying is I'm not convinced either way. I hope it's real. I want it to be real, but I don't have any way to prove it is, and I'm just using a little bit of gut instinct here to say that I think it's possibly real,
Nosferatu. What do you think of that? People say is still to this day, the 20s version is the scariest vampire on screen.
I'd have to agree with that. Yeah, I think just the iconic imagery of some of those scenes, are just, it's so creepy. And the fact that it is old, I mean, that's one reason it looks creepy is just the film quality is old. There's no talking in it. I think if I was creating a creepy vampire, that's kind of what I would try to go for. A dashing count. Some of those movies are cool, and the Hammer did it well with Christopher Lee. But really, I mean, as far as a vampire, it's not as creepy as Max Shrek.
Yeah. What about your nickname, the Count? How did that come about?
That's actually, I think high school is when that came about. It was, they called me Count or Count Lyall, and I kind of used that as my rock and roll name pretty much the whole time. But it was kind of a joke because as a kid, I was always into monsters and like vampires and so forth. And so at one of the band practices or whatever, I was counting off the songs. I was playing guitar, but I'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're like, "Okay, you count Lyall, and we'll start it." And they thought that sounded funny, Count Lyall. Hey, Count, get it? Haha, vampires. And then they just started calling me Count, And so, when it came to rock and roll name, I thought Count Lyall, whatever. And I was way, I was like way ahead of the curve on vampires or anything, because this would have been years and years ago. When I was a kid, I started playing when I was 16 in bands. So I was Count Lyall ever since.
Man, when I listen to your music, I hear horror in your music too. I mean, it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I hear like stuff like the Cramps and Social D, and it's just got this old school psychobilly. It's not quite metal, it's not quite punk, it's just psychobilly, good time, slightly gothic rock and roll. Am I summing it up? Am I on the right track a bit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you put all that in a blender, and I think, again, I'm just a fan of all kinds of music. And with our band Ghoultown, I've just found a format that I could just throw everything in there, kind of with a theme of this dark Texas spaghetti Western horror thing. Yeah. But yeah, it's just kind of a get up and go psychobilly, Western punk, outfit that just really fit no certain style or genre, so that I could slip in whatever I wanted to do with the music. And so that it's kind of a blessing and a curse, because we don't have any kind of scene or any kind of genre we fit in. People ask, what do you play? I'm like, I play in Ghoul Town. That's all I can tell you. Just go look it up, but but on the other hand, I want to do something unique, and people, whether they like it or not, they don't forget what Ghoul Town looks like or what they sound like.
Right. I mean, it's definitely cool, because I'm a fan of like bands like the Cramps and Reverend Horton Heat and and Social D. Just I love loud guitar driven rock. I love Rob Zombie. Just anything. I like dark stuff. I like it scary, but I like it campy and fun too. And it seems like you guys kind of captured that. It's pretty cool stuff. Pretty cool stuff. Have you guys shot any monster based music videos?
Well, we haven't done a lot with monsters in them per se, but we did shoot a video with Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. We did a song called Mistress of the Dark several years ago, which was kind of an unofficial theme song for her. We met her once at a horror convention, and her manager saw us play and wanted to do something with us. So we worked out, I wrote a song, and the song came out so cool that we ended up going out to Hollywood and shooting a video for it. Awesome. So it's kind of a long format video where, she acts in it, where we've got her Thunderbird Macabre mobile in the video. It's just so cool. And it's, for me, I mean, a monster kid, I'm sitting in this legendary car with Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. I'm just thinking on set, how the hell did I get here? It's
it's good times, man. Like I said, I see you as a guy who probably has a screenplay in the works, but I also see you as a guy who should have his own comic book series too. I mean, your love for writing and music and art and all things horror. Any more comic book stuff coming up, or any other ideas?
Well, I kind of, really had this thing about wanting to do a comic book. I'm a huge fan of comic books, and early on when we were doing Ghoul Town, I mean, this was at least 10 years ago, I had this idea to do kind of this horror Western comic book, which would sort of, it wasn't the characters in the band doing stuff, but our band was in it. We played in saloons every once in a while, so it was sort of a connection to reality. But I did some issues, like a mini series that was published by a small comic publisher out of Houston, Texas, which ended up folding, and we did a few issues, and I never pursued it after that. I just didn't have time. The music was too demanding at the time, and I wasn't going to self-publish, and I don't draw at all. I mean, you don't want to see people go, hey, did you draw this? Do you do your covers? I'm like, no, these are by professional artists. So I just kind of let that go by the wayside, and I'm just chasing too many rabbits with trying to do comics, and I tried to focus in on the music, and now, like I said, I'm focused in on doing books and comic books. It's a hard road. And one of my friends, Steve Niles, a guy like that that guy works his ass off. He is, the best horror comics writer. He's working his ass off, and that's all he does. So I think, man, me half-assing it as a side project, I'll leave it to Steve, man.
Yeah. Let's focus on what we're good at. And what you're good at is writing about monsters and playing rock and roll. Is that safe? Is that a safe assumption there?
Yeah, I'd say I'm pretty good at those.
Okay, cool. Well, then let's talk about your next book. Is your next book going to be a follow-up to Beast of Boggy Creek, or are you taking on a new cryptid?
I'm going to take on a new cryptid. But I've actually gotten a lot of reports and things that I could do another Fouke Monster book. Of course, I need to let that develop more. But one thing I wanted to do is tackle another cryptid and another really cool story that I thought fit that format. Something that, like the Boggy Creek thing, hadn't really had a great book written about it. Somewhere where I see things on the internet all the time where if you look at the newspaper reports and then you look at what's written on the internet, there's a lot of mistakes and errors and omissions in these things. And so what I've done is take another really famous case, and I won't say exactly what it is, but let's just say it's more along the lines of real life creatures from the Black Lagoon, which is great because I love that subject. And what I've done is delve very deep into the case. I went out to this town where this all occurred, visited with the locals, collected all the newspaper articles from over the years, and went into the environment again, went into kind of this swampy place where the creature's said to live, and really researched it firsthand. And so I write about my process of looking into this and how I got into writing the book about it, as well as about the history of this creature and similar other creatures from the Black Lagoon. So I think it's cool because it's not a Bigfoot book, but it's a cryptid book, and kind of shows that I'm not just a guy who writes Bigfoot books. I'm doing cryptids,
At a recent Texas event you spoke at, Josh Gates was there as well. Did you get a chance to talk to him about some of his overseas adventures?
Yeah, I did talk to Josh. It was really cool to be able to do an event with Josh because obviously he's been all around the world and can comment on places and fill you in on the almost the dangers of going in certain places. He went there first, so I can kind of fish it out to see whether I want to go there myself or not. But yeah, it was a great event at the Texas Bigfoot conference here, which they had in Fort Worth. And I do a lot of these events all over, so it was great to have one near Dallas-Fort Worth where I live. But Josh did a presentation about his travels, which was really fascinating. Really one of the highlights of seeing presentations at some of these events. And of course, we talked, privately and talked about things. And so, yeah, it was a real treat to see him.
A lot of people, give me a hard time because I say, well, in the Bigfoot industry, you go to these, there aren't a whole lot of hot chicks in there. Are there enough? How about out in Texas? Do the Bigfoot shows bring in the hot chicks?
Well, they're at the show. If you're at a show where I am, the hot chicks are at my booth, and I think people that have been to come to my book signings will know I travel with beautiful women, and these young ladies have been instrumental in helping my band with the merchandising. And so when I started doing Bigfoot conventions and writing books, I said, hey, y'all want to go to some of these and help me out doing these sightings? And they've had a really great time. So no exaggeration that the girls at my booth are extremely hot and are legendary somewhat in the Ghoul Town world, but I guess somewhat in the Bigfoot world. But yeah, I don't know.
I bring that up because I've heard that rumor before. And so who draws more hotties, Josh Gates at a Bigfoot show or at a Ghoul Town rock and roll show?
Well, Josh, I got you beat, brother. I don't know. I mean, but yeah, but we both draw a lot of, sweaty woodsmen who are interested in Bigfoot. But, hey, it's all about the stories, and we enjoy meeting everyone. But, hot chicks encouraged to come out to some of these conferences because, I know girls love monsters too. And
Right. Are you like me and not offended by the hot chick slasher flick? You know, do you appreciate a good bikini killing scene in a slasher flick?
Well, I mean, it's all over the place. It's in comic books. It's in these horror movies and stuff. I mean, hey, girls and monsters go hand in hand. It's just sort of, it's always kind of been there. And no matter what people say about it, it's a big part of the horror industry. And hey, that's part of what I like. I mean, it's just the way it is.
What are some other good Bigfoot movies? You were the movie, horror guy. Besides Legend of Boggy Creek, what other Bigfoot movies would you recommend?
There was one, I believe it's from the 80s, called Snow Beast. It was a made-for-TV movie, and that one's pretty good. As a matter of fact, I think it's a new issue of Rue Morgue in Bowen's basement. He talked about old movies. He actually wrote about that, which was cool. I was like, yeah, that movie's a good one. Let's see. There's another one of my favorites that's not. It's a Bigfoot movie, but it's not. It's really well done. It's called Paper Dolls, and it never got released, which I don't understand why. It's really cool, and I just sort of throw that out there all the time because most people never heard of it. So it's called Paper Dolls. If you could find a copy, it blows my mind that it never got released.
I will definitely look into that one. Have you had a chance to see Eduardo's movie yet?
No, I've only seen the trailer. He came down to an event we were doing in Jefferson, Texas, in East Texas, back in October, and he and the producer were kind of doing some publicity. We were doing a thing for CBS, the CBS Sunday morning show, and they were able to show the trailer at this event. It was amazing. And I saw the trailer, and, Eduardo and I have the same idea about the Legend of Boggy Creek and about the way that affected us as kids. And, while I'm writing the history, he's trying to do the visual end and bringing a movie to the current generation that captures that same feel. And from what I could see from the trailer, it definitely did. I mean, this ain't your mama's Bigfoot.
Good, because a lot of people these days are trying to humanize this thing, and I like the idea of a predator. I like the idea of scary things in your backyard. I don't like this tree-hugging version that a lot of people are putting out there. I think Bigfoot should be scary.
Well, and if it's in a horror movie, it rightly should be. And that's, there's a place for Letters from the Big Man or whatever, the movie, that's great. It's a good take on Bigfoot. But if you're going to put Bigfoot in a horror movie, you might as well go all the way, because speaking of, there was another one called Savage, which reminds me a little bit of a good style where this Bigfoot moved quick. It was sort of baboon-like in a way. It was, the movie was pretty well done. I mean, for a Bigfoot film, so Savage is one to look up. But I think Eduardo's got the right. He just flat out said, I'm trying to make Bigfoot scary again. And hey, that's what I think it should be if you're going to put it in a horror movie.
You want to tell everybody where they can find you and what they can look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the best place to get an overview of everything I do and get some links would be at my personal website, which is LyleBlackburn.com. So if you go there, there's links to my band, which would be Ghoultown.com, Ghoultown, for the band. Let's see, I've got a site dedicated to the Fouke Monster, which is the subject of my book, The Beast of Boggy Creek, which is FoukeMonster.net. So you can go over there and check out some other stuff. I've got some other photos that I didn't include in the book, some additional information, videos even of the area, because I've gone down some of the like the Sulphur River and some of the areas and done some filming, so people could kind of get a sense of what these places look like that I talk about in the book. So the Fouke Monster site is really cool. But, just check out LyleBlackburn.com. I've got all my appearances listed on there, because I come to places all over. I mean, last year I was in many states. I mean, we did some stuff in Kentucky, Sacramento. I go to Toronto, at different horror conventions.
Are we getting you out here on the West Coast anytime soon?
No, I don't have anything booked for the West Coast so far. In the West Coast, I don't get out too much. Yeah. I did something in Sacramento last year, but West Coast doesn't seem to show me as much love as I guess. Well, I guess Midwest or East Coast or even Canada. So
you hear that, West Coast? We need to show Lyall some more love because I'm a fan, man, and I dig the whole thing.
This has been fun. I mean, yeah, these are the subjects I love most. So yeah, we could really just go off on this all night. So maybe we can continue on a future episode. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on and being able to promote. And yeah, just everybody hit up LyleBlackburn.com and check out what I do and shoot me an email and
check your schedule. Coming to a Bigfoot convention, a cryptid convention near you.
Near you.
Right on. All right,
and so to a TV station near you. I got to say that there's a new show called American Monsters and Mysteries in America on Destination America channel that's doing a new show, and they're going to do a Fouke Monster episode, I think, next month. Whenever this airs, look for that. Yeah. And I got some other TV appearances. So
very cool, man.